This is where you set the parameters for how Tessitura builds the current exercise. Anything you change here will immediately be applied to the current exercise. Remember that in Tessitura, there's always an exercise loaded, and you can save an exercise with the Save button. The app will ask you if you want to replace the current one or create a new one. So all the changes that you make here won't be saved to a file until you decide to save. You can change the time signature with this pop-up. Tessitura can play even eighth notes or swung eighth notes. Set the swing to 0 to set it to even eighths. If you want to add some swing, adjust the slider to match your preference at the current tempo. Once you've chosen a specific swing amount that you like for the current tempo, you can check this button and Tessitura will try to keep a similar swing style at different tempos. Usually, faster tempos require less swing, so with this enabled, Tessitura will decide how much swing to use as you change tempos to match your original style. To create the step-skip pattern and rhythmic pattern manually, you use this section. But you can use your MIDI device to input a pattern with the MIDI editor, and Tessitura will analyze your input and automatically set all the parameters based on your MIDI input. To learn how to use the MIDI editor, watch this tutorial. If you want to create or tweak a pattern manually, then you can use the controllers here. Remember that Tessitura creates the exercise by combining a rhythmic pattern and a step-skip pattern. You can choose any of the preset rhythmic patterns here, or you can manually enter the rhythm. Use H for half notes, Q for quarter notes, E for eighth notes, and S for 16th notes. If you want a dotted rhythm, just add a D before it. Use DH for dotted half, DQ for dotted quarter, and DE for dotted eighth. There are no dotted 16ths. If you want to enter rest, use R. So RQ would be a quarter rest. You can enter eighth note triplets, but they have to be all together. So you can only type TE, TE, TE. If you want to shift the starting placement, use the rhythmic shift slider. So if I set the slider to this eighth note, it shifts the entire rhythmic pattern an eighth note earlier, effectively creating a pickup. The app uses step-skip patterns to calculate the notes based on the current scale or current upper structure if there's one loaded. By default, the first note is always the root of the scale. So if I have the C major scale selected and I type A1, it'll create an ascending C scale starting on C. Tessitura will decide on which octave to start based on your instrument selection and the range that you've chosen in the instruments panel. And it will repeat the step-skip pattern until it has covered the entire range of your instrument. After that, it'll use a retrograde of the pattern, and it'll keep doing that until it has covered the entire length of the exercise, which you set in the bar count menu here. So you define the pattern by entering steps and skips with numbers separated by commas. It's important to understand that a step in Tessitura means the next note in the scale. So a 1 is just every note in the scale going up, and a -1 is the previous note. A 2 means skip one note, and a 3 skips 2 notes, and so on. For example, if I write 1 -1, the app will just go up to the next note and come back down forever. If I type 1, 2, -1, then that's a step up followed by a skip up and then a step down. So the resulting line would be an ascending line. Try a few numbers and it'll become clear how this feature works. Use this slider if you want to start on a different note other than the root of the scale. 1 is the root, 2 is the second note in the scale, and so on. You can add enclosures to the first note of every iteration of the pattern. To visualize how this works, I'm going to enable the colors option in the staff preferences. Blue note heads indicate the first note in each iteration of the pattern. If the pattern is just a 1, then all the notes are blue because the pattern restarts after every note. If we use the 1, 2, -1, then the pattern will restart every 3 notes because it's defined by 3 numbers. So when you use an enclosure, it will only be applied to the blue notes. And there are two kinds of approach tones, chromatic and diatonic. And they could be from above or below the target. You would use a B to indicate an approach from below and an A to indicate an approach from above. So if I choose lowercase b for this pattern, then every blue note will be preceded by a chromatic approach from below. If we use an uppercase A, that means diatonic from above. So every blue note is now preceded by the next note in the scale from above. In Tessitura, diatonic means a note that belongs to the scale. You can also use 1 or -1 for chromatic and 2 or -2 for diatonic approaches. Also, enclosures can be stacked from below or above. So if I type -1, -1, -1, then I'm stacking 3 chromatic approaches from below to get a triple chromatic approach. And finally, it's important to understand that both the rhythmic and step-skip patterns iterate for the duration of the exercise, but they are independent. In other words, they do not need to match the amount of notes. For example, if the rhythmic pattern is 3 notes long, let's say quarter, eighth, eighth, and the step-skip pattern is only 2 notes long, let's say 2 - 1, then the resulting exercise will be this. Notice how the blue notes, representing the first note of a pattern, do not match with the rhythmic pattern. This creates really interesting and challenging lines, including hemiolas and metric shifts. Also, patterns are independent from the scales. So if I have this pattern on Ionian, I can simply load the Hungarian minor scale, and the same pattern will be applied to that as well.